I can't think of a better cause than trying to protect children who are being harmed by the very people who are supposed to be protecting them. For me, that fact was underscored during one of the first client meetings that I had in connection with this case. We went up to the Bronx one evening and met with a 13-year-old girl who told us about an experience that she had had the prior year when she was an 11-year-old 6th grader. She described to us how one day she was sitting in class at her desk next to a friend who was sitting at his desk. Two kids doodled just a little bit on their desks in erasable ink. The teacher noticed this and told the kids that they needed to clean it up. So our client and her friend went and got tissue so that they could wipe off their desks. Before they were able to do that, a school safety officer arrived. He took both of the kids to what evidently gets called a security room in a lot of these schools. It's really a seclusion room where kids are taken by school safety officers. Eventually, for this offense of writing on her desk in erasable ink, our client, who was 11 years old at the time, got handcuffed, paraded out of school, and perp walked into a local police precinct by an armed NYPD officer. Our client spent several hours in that precinct, handcuffed to a desk. She was told by the officer who had brought her to the precinct that he might decide to put her in general population with people he described as killers and murderers. He went so far as to show her mugshots of those people. Well, ultimately, our client was allowed to go home with her mother, and you probably won't be surprised to know that no charges were ever pursued. Naturally, that didn't end the emotional and psychological aspects of this experience for our client, who even today, over a year after it happened, remains scarred by those events. I suppose that in the interest of full disclosure, I should admit that this story struck a personal note with me that might not be entirely obvious. As I listened to our client talk about what had happened, I thought about the number of times when, as a kid, I had written The Clash or the name of some other rock and roll band on a New York City public school desk. Wasn't able to come up with a number, but I'm certainly sure that if I had been arrested every time I had done that, I would have spent a lot more of my day in police precincts than I would have in school. In some ways, the most remarkable thing about the episode that I described was not the story itself. It was the fact that nobody at the NYPD or at the school seemed to think that anything had gone wrong. Nobody seemed to think that this situation was handled inappropriately. Certainly nobody did anything about it. That's why we're doing something about it. And while I certainly think it's a sad day when you have to bring a federal claim in order to try to protect an 11-year-old and keep her from getting handcuffed when she writes on her desk, it really doesn't seem like there's any alternative. Speaking of personal notes, our complaint, while a legal document, is full of very personal and very human stories, such as those that you already heard about today. I commend those stories to you. They really are what this case is all about. Thank you very much.